I come to you tonight not to add a new teaching to the old, not to give you another philosophy to clutter the mind, but to point to a single, revolutionary event. An event so profound that it does not merely reform the man you believe yourself to be, it dissolves him. We have all heard the words, born again. We have clothed them in the garments of theology, wrapped them in the ceremony of ritual, and tucked them safely away as a concept belonging to a specific moment in time. But I am not here to discuss a concept. I am here to point to an actual, tangible, and verifiable alchemy of spirit. What if being born again has nothing to do with adopting a new creed and everything to do with the shocking, undeniable realization that the you have spent a lifetime nurturing, with its fears, its ambitions, its personal history, is but a ghost, a shadow cast upon the wall of human consciousness? What happens when the sense of I shifts from this temporary tenant to the permanent, immortal tenant within? This is not a gentle improvement. It is a disappearance. It is the end of the world, your world. Stay with me in the silence that follows these words, for in the next few moments we will venture together to the very brink of this truth. We will look into the chasm where the old man dies, and we will dare to ask what is truly left standing in the light. And if this journey inward resonates with the truth of your own being, if you feel the pull of that inner teacher, then do not let the world distract you from this grace. Nourish this seed. Like this video to return to it, comment the number 3 below, symbolizing the 3 days in the tomb before the resurrection, to signify your readiness for this rebirth, and subscribe so that we may continue this walk from the marketplace of human thought into the temple of the Most High God. Of course, here is the expansion of your first keynote, continuing directly from the end of your introduction to maintain a seamless flow. And we will dare to ask what is truly left standing in the light, what the great misstep, the foundational error that has kept this truth locked away as a theological idea rather than a living reality, is the almost universal misinterpretation of being born again as an external event. The human mind, in its relentless effort to comprehend the infinite with finite tools, has taken this mystical, internal process of spirit and reduced it to a transaction of the world. It has been framed as a public declaration, a change of affiliation, a verbal acceptance of a creed, or the adoption of a new set of moral or behavioral codes. Accept, to believe, to profess, and in so doing, we are promised that the rebirth is complete. But this, I must tell you, is merely the redecoration of the prison cell. The prisoner has learned new songs to sing, has put new paintings on the wall, and has perhaps even convinced himself that his chains are now jewels. But he remains, fundamentally, a prisoner. He is still operating from the same central core of selfhood, the old man, of which Paul spoke. This self may now be a religious self, a virtuous self, a self that feels superior in its newfound correctness, but it is a self nonetheless. It is a creation of the mind, a construct of memory, desire, and fear, now dressed in sacred robes. The Master Jesus did not say, "You must be reformed." He did not say, "You must be improved." He said, "You must be born again." And birth is not an act of the thing being born. The infant does not decide to be born. It is acted upon by a force greater than itself. It is ushered into a new realm of existence through a profound and often traumatic process that leaves its previous state utterly behind. To be born again, in the Spirit, is to be acted upon by grace. It is to have the very foundation of your identity, the sense of I, as a separate, self-willed entity, ushered out of the womb of human consciousness and into the kingdom of God. When we mistake the symbols for the substance, we build a life upon a mirage. We may have the language of the new birth on our lips, but we still experience the fears, the conflicts, the lacks, and the tribulations of the old one. We are like a man who has been given the legal deed to a vast estate, who can quote every clause of the document, but who continues to live in the poverty of his one-room shack because he has never actually set foot on the land that is now his. The deed is not the dwelling. The concept is not the consciousness. And until this misinterpretation is shattered, we are left with a religions about God rather than the actual, lived experience of God. We are left with a self trying to become spiritual, unaware that the very activity of the self is what obscures the spirit that is already and eternally present. This is the great wall that must fall before the new landscape can even be glimpsed. This is the great wall that must fall before the new landscape can even be glimpsed. For the landscape that is revealed is not one of an improved self, but of a dissolved self. This is the core of the mystery, the point where theology meets authentic transformation, the dissolution of the personal ego, the old man. The world, and indeed much of religion, is dedicated to the opposite principle. The salvation, the improvement, the fulfillment of this very same ego. We are taught to build a better life, to cultivate a stronger character, to overcome our flaws and amplify our virtues. All of this is the work of the carpenter upon the old wood, sanding and polishing the same essential structure. But the new birth is not a renovation, it is a demolition. It is the shocking, and often deeply unsettling, realization that the central character in the story of your life, the one you call I, is not the ultimate reality. It is a composite, a collection of reactions, memories, conditioned responses, and desires that has congealed around a sense of separation from God. This I is the creator of your personal world of good and evil, of lack and fulfillment, of fear and hope. It is the architect of your suffering, for its entire existence is predicated on the illusion that it is alone, a fragile entity navigating a hostile or indifferent universe, forever seeking to protect and aggrandize itself. To be born again is for this self-constructed center to be unmasked, not through an act of psychological violence, but through the gentle, relentless pressure of the ever-present Christ. As your attention turns from the outer world of effect to the inner world of cause, a profound shift begins. You start to witness your own thoughts and emotions not as commands you must obey, but as clouds passing through a sky that you are. You watch the old urges for recognition, for security, for control arise and fall, and in that watching, a sacred space opens. In that space, where the identification with these patterns is broken, the sense of I am-ness begins to detach from the personality and its drama. This is not a loss of identity, but the discovery of your true identity. It is the old man, the reactive, grasping, fearful self, that is being put off, not by your willpower, but because it is being seen for what it is, a shadow, a temporary formation having no substance in the light of reality. This is the crucifixion that must precede the resurrection. It is the ending of the world as you have known it. The fear that arises at this threshold is the ego's final desperate defense, its scream against its own impending oblivion. But this dissolution is the greatest mercy, for it is only the phantom that dies, only the dream that ends, making way for what you have eternally been. I'm making way for what you have eternally been. This is the great transition, the silent shift in identity from the creature to the Christ. The human scene is one of continuous becoming. The self is always in a state of striving, of seeking to become healthier, wealthier, wiser, or more holy. It is a perpetual journey toward a horizon that forever recedes. But the message of the Christ is not one of becoming, but of his being. It reveals that what you are in truth is not a creature on a pilgrimage toward God, but the very presence of God. What individualized as your conscious awareness here and now? The creature is the sense of a selfhood born of the world, a product of genetics, environment, and past experience. It is the one who feels separate, who prays to a distant God for intervention, one who believes salvation is something to be attained in a future heaven or through future grace. Its entire existence is a narrative of a self in relation to something other than itself. The Christ, however, is not a person. It is the divine principle of your being, the uncreated, eternal I am that was before Abraham, before the world was formed. It is the substance of your soul. the animating life that breathes you, the conscious awareness in which your entire experience unfolds. To shift your identity to the Christ is to realize that you are not in the universe is in you. It is to understand that the power which raised the form of Jesus is the same power that forms your next thought and beats your heart. This is not a metaphysical theory to be believed, but a living reality to be witnessed. As the clamor of the personal self subsides through your patient and dedicated inner listening, a new actor begins to take the stage of your experience. You will find yourself knowing things you did not learn, expressing a love you do not personally manufacture, and demonstrating a power that is clearly not your own. You will begin to see through the eyes of the one who sees no sin, no sickness, and no separation, because it sees only its own perfect likeness. Where the creature saw a problem to be solved, the Christ perceives a divine adjustment to be made manifest. Where the creature felt fear and lack, the Christ abides in the omnipresent fullness of the Father. This is not you as a human personality becoming divine. That is the ultimate arrogance of the ego. This is you as a human personality dying to its own illusory supremacy and getting out of the way so that the divinity that has always been your core can flow forth unimpeded. You are not here to become the Christ. You are here to be the Christ by letting the fiction of the separate self fall away and allowing the only true identity there is to stand revealed. Allowing the only true identity there is to stand revealed. And how does this revelation occur? It is not through an act of will, nor through the accumulation of knowledge, but through an inner, alchemical event of consciousness. This is a word we must reclaim from the mystics, alchemy. It does not mean a change in external circumstances, as if you could turn the lead of your poverty into the gold of wealth, while leaving the alchemist himself unchanged. True spiritual alchemy is the transformation of the very instrument of perception. It is the lead of your human, sense-based consciousness being transmuted into the gold of Christ consciousness. This event is an act of grace, initiated from a level of reality far beyond the reach of the human mind. The mind can prepare the laboratory, it can cultivate the silence, practice the devotion, and study the truth, but it cannot perform the transmutation. That is the sacred fire that descends from the Father of Lights. This alchemy takes place in the depths of your being, in that innermost sanctuary where you are alone with the alone. It is a catalytic process where the pure, unadulterated truth you have entertained in your contemplation comes into contact with the living spirit, and a new faculty is ignited. It is like the moment when water subjected to the right conditions ceases to be a liquid and becomes a gas, its very nature is transformed. So it is with you. When this event occurs, your perception is fundamentally and permanently altered. You look upon the very same world, but you see it through new eyes. Where you once saw solid, separate objects, you may now perceive a flowing, interconnected field of divine energy. Where you once heard a problem, you may now hear a call for the expression of a spiritual quality. The world of effect loses its solidity and becomes transparent, a symbol pointing back to its divine cause. This is why intellectual understanding is not enough. You can memorize every principle of the infinite way, you can quote Goldsmith perfectly, and yet remain untouched by this alchemy. The mind can grasp the map, but it is the spirit that transports you to the territory. This event is the birth, in Born Again. It is the emergence of a new capacity to know God, not as a concept, but as the very substance and reality of your own life and of all that you behold. It is the point at which truth moves from being a beautiful philosophy you study on Thursday nights to becoming the very blood in your veins and the air you breathe. It is a dying and a rising, all at once in the silent, fiery crucible of your own awakened heart. In the silent, fiery crucible of your own awakened heart. This dying and rising signals the end of the personal sense of I. This is perhaps the most challenging aspect of the journey for the human mind to comprehend, for it feels like a loss of everything we have ever known ourselves to be. The personal I is the author, the main character, and the central reference point for the entire story of our life. It is the I that feels proud, that feels ashamed, that is afraid, the I that seeks, that possesses, and that loses. We have spent a lifetime building its citadel, defending its borders, and polishing its image. To speak of its end sounds like annihilation. But I am here to tell you that it is not annihilation. It is the correction of a profound and fundamental misidentification. The personal sense of I is a vortex of thought and sensation that has mistaken itself for the whole ocean. When this sense of I recedes, what remains is not a void, but the ocean itself, the vast, impersonal and eternal I am. This is that Jesus spoke of when he said, I and the Father are one. It is not the I of his human personality named Jesus, but the universal Christ, the one divine ego, which he knew as his only true identity. As this shift occurs, you do not become a blank slate or a passive observer. Rather, you begin to live as a transparency through which this one I am lives and expresses its own infinite nature. The pressure to be somebody dissolves. The anxiety that you must control outcomes, protect your reputation, or secure your future begins to evaporate. For the one who is carrying that burden is simply no longer at the center of the universe. You find yourself speaking, acting, and moving through the world, but there is a growing, unmistakable awareness that the source of the action is not the limited personal self. It is the Father within who does the works. The personal I becomes a useful instrument in the world of form, a vehicle for communication and action, but it is no longer mistaken for the master. It is a flute through which the divine breath flows, a cup from which the living water is poured. You will still sign your name, you will still fulfill your responsibilities, but you will do so with the quiet, unshakable knowledge that the one acting is not the name, but the nameless. The fears and desires that once defined the boundaries of your life lose their grip, not because you have conquered them, but because the one they were gripping has, like a mirage, faded into the truth of what has always been. Faded into the truth of what has always been. And what is the nature of a life lived from this truth? It is the continuous, spontaneous activity of living from the immanent presence, not from personal will. This is the final keynote, the demonstration of the new birth. The personal sense of I was a creature of volition, of effort, of striving. Its entire existence was a project of building a life through its own planning, its own strength, and its own understanding. It prayed as a beggar, petitioning a separate God to intervene in its story, to grant its desires and avert its disasters. Its life was a constant calculation, a weighing of risks and rewards, a battle fought with the weapons of human intellect and will. But when the immanent presence is realized as your very own being, this entire paradigm collapses. You are no longer a separate entity trying to navigate a foreign landscape. You are the landscape, and the life that animates it. Your activity ceases to be a reaction to external stimuli and becomes a spontaneous expression of the divine impulse from within. You do not need to will yourself to be loving, for love itself flows forth from your center without any personal effort. You do not need to strive for peace is the very atmosphere of your abiding in the Father. Guidance is no longer something you seek from a book or a teacher outside yourself. It is the constant, gentle, and unmistakable current of your own being. You move with it as naturally as a leaf turns in the breeze. Your work in the world is no longer performed for personal gain or recognition, but because it is the divine activity appearing as your specific form and function. The carpenter is no longer a separate self who builds a house. He is the location where the infinite intelligence of the universe is expressing as the skill of the hands and the wisdom of the design. The mother comforting her child is no longer a separate person expressing her personal love. She is the very activity of the divine comforter, individualized. Your life becomes a benediction, not because you are trying to be a blessing, but because you have become a clear and unobstructed channel through which the one blessing, which is God, pours itself out into the world of form. You do not live your life, the life of God lives you. Your breath is its breath. Your sight is its sight. Your love is its love. There is no longer a you and God, there is only the singular divine isness functioning infinitely and perfectly as all form, including the form you once called yourself. This is the peace that passes understanding. This is the joy unspeakable. This is the rest that remains.